the Houston Dynamo on this date. It's hard to believe it's been 13 years. It doesn't seem like it was that long ago.
True enough.
With that, we turn right now to Charlie Gerow, President and CEO of Quantum Communication. You can find him at charliegerow.com. And he joins us here this morning to talk a little bit about the first 3+ weeks here of Donald Trump in office now. And Charlie, good morning. Welcome to the show. How you doing?
And good morning to you, Gary. Great to hear you back on the air, and great to be with you.
Well, great to have you in here this morning. But before we get to all of that stuff, being a true Philadelphia fan as you are, this has got to be a happy time for you, right?
This is a very happy time, Gary. I really thought the Eagles were going to win, and that worried me because I thought, being a Philly boy, I'm going to jinx them because I think they're actually going to win. But I had no idea that it was going to be the tail-kicking, shall we say, for public consumption that it was. And I thought, Gary, interestingly, I thought it was going to be the offensive line of the Eagles that really did the job. They outweighed the Chiefs by about 25 pounds per man.
Right.
But it was the defensive front four. I mean, they were just unbelievable. Not a single blitz in the entire game.
I know. Is that amazing?
They came up with six sacks, one shy of the record. I mean, it's just amazing.
That was as good a defensive effort by a front four that I've ever seen in a game. And I talk about dominant. I mean, there was nowhere to go. And you watch Mahomes, who always has found a way to kind of get it done. And even Andy Reid standing over there, who looked, he's a genius offensively and had no answers. I mean, there was nothing. And they just dominated. It was up, 40-8 before they scored two meaningless touchdowns at the end to make it look closer. But it was never that close. 40-6, exactly. So, it was an amazing performance there. And I thought the fact that Jalen Hurts finally gets some credit amidst all the talk about, Lamar Jackson and what about the guy in Buffalo and Mahomes and people like that. And Burrow, and here's Jalen Hurts standing there at the end, who I think kind of comes across as like one of the more humble quarterbacks in the whole league. Your thoughts on him?
No doubt. I mean, he's a super player, an even better human being, a really devout Christian, as you know, Gary. And he earned everything that he got the other night, and I just loved that scene. I'm sure you saw it, very poignant, of him just sitting there in the hallway with the MVP trophy between his legs, just kind of taking it all in.
Yeah.
It's very, very touching.
Yeah, really, really good. And the only thing we do know about him during the week, too, he does not like the word tush-push. He says quarterback sneak is fine with me. I'm not real big on the tush-push thing or the brotherly shove or whatever it's called. But I'll tell you what, it certainly works for them very, very well. What a great season for Philadelphia, and they played their very best football at the very most important time of the year.
Yeah, they really did, and they put up nearly 100 points, Gary, in the last two games, the championship game and the Super Bowl. I mean, it's just unbelievable what they did, and a lot of credit to Nick Sirianni, to Howie Roseman, who is a genius, and to a great organization.
Yeah, exactly.
But it really was a team effort. It really was a team effort, and Saquon Barkley. I was not a big Barkley fan when he came here. I sure as heck am now. He's my favorite Eagle.
Well, what a great addition to an already really good program, and it was like the missing piece, and they put that in there with what they already had, and it seemed to fit perfectly. And Barkley setting a record for the most yards, including playoff games this year, well over 2,000. So huge season for Philadelphia, and for fans of Philadelphia, you can start hearing the let's do 2 in a row next year, and we'll see how that all goes down in the 60th Super Bowl next year. So the first 3+ weeks now of Trump have been dizzying, to say the least. And one of the things that people ask about, and I'm being an old history guy, I'm looking at it saying, what about separation of powers? What about checks and balances? Is government in balance right now? We were talking with James Sanders about that a little bit ago, but I wanted to get your analysis of where Trump has gone here in the first 3+ weeks and where everything stands right at the moment from your vantage point, Charlie. So I'll let you take it away there.
Well, first of all, Gary, he's doing what he promised to do.
He is.
And that in and of itself is a big plus. 2, he had a mandate from the voters. He didn't necessarily have one 8 years ago. And C, he has the A team. I mean, he's got folks that know what to do, know how to do it, and they're getting it done at warp speed. I mean, they've done more in 3 weeks than the Biden administration did for 4 years. And, I'm not a big fan, as you know, of executive orders.
Yeah.
I think that Congress has ceded too much power to the executive, whether it's Trump or Obama or Biden or whomever. But that's where the world is today, and President Trump has very effectively used executive orders. Now, how much running room the courts are ultimately going to give the executive, not him personally, but the executive,
right,
kind of remains to be seen. But, I'm very, very happy with what they've been able to accomplish in very, very short order.
Well, and again, as we've said so many times, he's pushing the envelope. I mean, he has obviously pushed the envelope of how much power the executive branch can wield. And I don't think it's necessarily a terrible thing right now. It could get ridiculous after a while, I guess, but where the courts are slowing him down a little bit and saying, well, let's take a breath here for a second and see how far we can go. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I think that, in some respects, just taking a look at exactly what the power of the executive is, because my friends on the right have to remember that Donald Trump is not going to be president forever.
Exactly.
And you don't necessarily want to have unlimited power invested in the executive if you've got somebody wielding the pen who's doing bad things. And, additionally, Congress has some culpability here because they have, out of cowardice, I don't know if there's any other word, they don't want to make the tough calls, politically. So they say, well, let the executive do that. Let the exec do that. And that's not the way the system was set up by our founders.
I remember years ago when President Obama was in, and they had the whole DACA thing going on. He said, well, I can't do that. He said, because that's Congress's power. Well, then Congress didn't do it, and he put the DACA program in anyway and kind of said, well, if they're not going to do it, I can. The Founding Fathers never said that. They never said, well, if the one branch isn't doing it, you can, and yet is kind of a natural thing for a branch to then go about and say, well, if we want something done, we'll end up having to do it. And that's the never-ending argument that continues to go on right now that you alluded to a moment ago, Charlie.
You're right. And, I mean, Congress, does have powers that they ought to exercise. Correct. And ought to guard very jealously, because that's the way the founders set up our system. It was a tripartite system of government filled with checks and balances that worked for the benefit of the people. And it's not necessarily so that because Congress fails to act, that the executive can step in and with the stroke of a pen do what Congress has the authority to do.
One of the things we're having a tough time with are people separating personality from policy. And they're saying, well, Elon Musk shouldn't have the power to go in and check Social Security numbers and do all that kind of stuff. And Donald Trump this. And we get looking at the personalities instead of what the acts are. And there are a lot of people in the country saying, well, we're in favor of a Doge-type attitude. We're in favor of government efficiency and accountability. We're in favor of a reasonable immigration policy at the border and elsewhere. We're in favor of all that. We just don't like the fact Donald Trump's involved with it or Elon Musk is. But that's the reality that we have right now. Talk about that a little bit, Charlie.
Well, yeah, and I mean, that's unfortunately where some on the left are. They don't like Donald Trump. So anything that he does is going to be wrong. I mean, it's just the Trump derangement syndrome continues. And I get a real chuckle out of nobody elected Elon Musk. And I saw the other day a meme that had a picture of Dr. Fauci and said, who elected him?
Great point. Now, talk a little bit about immigration, and I know that's one of the areas you've been looking at. You are a legal immigrant in our country, and from Brazil. You've talked about that and where your beginnings were. But, we look now, and we're seeing, I won't say quite crickets at the border, but since he kind of made some pretty strong moves there early, right out of the gate, we're even reading now about migrants who are going back the other direction now because they know that there is a real emphasis on enforcement at the border. Thoughts on that?
So important, Gary. I mean, you drew the vital and critical distinction between illegal immigration and legal immigration. And the people, interestingly, who are most vociferous and feel most strongly about illegal immigration are folks like myself who are legal immigrants who came here the right way, who went through a very arduous process of becoming citizens, learning the language, etc. And, we feel very, very, very strongly about people that snuck across the border at night.
Tariffs. We just saw 25% tariffs going out all around the world right now on aluminum and steel. And the tariffs, there's a debate on that. Tariffs are being used as kind of a club right now. And I will say, so far for President Trump, and again, whether you like him or don't like him, tariffs have worked. He threatened tariffs on Mexico. He threatened tariffs on Canada. He threatened tariffs on Colombia. And in all cases, they all kind of gave in a little bit and said, okay, we'll send 10,000 people up here to guard the border if you're Mexico, or we'll fly people in who are being deported into Colombia in our presidential jet, or in Canada, we'll send people to help on the border there. So you've seen the results so far of tariffs. Now the European Union's coming out and saying, oh, this 25% tariff, we're going to have to respond in kind. We'll wait and see how that goes down. But the tariffs have been used as something of a leverage, a club, if you like, a negotiating tool, if you like. Your thoughts on the use of tariffs so far?
Well, tariffs, Gary, interestingly, in my judgment, are most effective when they're used simply as a club and not necessarily imposed, but where the executive, President Trump, says, if you don't do X, I'll do Y. Because once you do Y, you do get into the potential for trade wars and tariffs being imposed, bilaterally, which, ultimately will cost the American consumers. I don't think there's too much question about that. So, it's a little bit of a risk game. And I understand that President Trump is, the great deal maker and negotiator, but you've got to be careful, in my judgment, about the actual imposition of tariffs, as opposed to the mere threatening of them. If you got 1 second, I got to tell you one that I think is kind of comical.
Go ahead.
That China, who has abused us in every way possible,
right,
got very upset about the tariffs imposed on them. They went to the World Trade Organization. Like, ooh.
Yeah.
And what's comical about that, guy, is that the WTO is a toothless tiger, if ever there was one. The actual appellate process has been stripped out long ago by the U.S. I mean, I think it happened under the Obama administration, interestingly, but it has had bipartisan support through the Trump years and even through the Biden years of us not even allowing it to operate. So, when China goes to the WTO, you just kind of got to chop them.
Well, the WTA reminds me of the World Trade, or WTO. It reminds me of the English Boppy who said, stop or I'll say stop again. And that's about what you have with them. Charlie, always great having you on. And thank you so much for weighing in this morning. And again, congratulations on Philadelphia. And now go Villanova, right? That's the next worry here that we have along the way. But
well, that's a little tougher sled than the Philadelphia Eagles. But hey, real quick, Gary, I'm a Duke fan this year because of Cooper Flagg, who I followed since he was in junior high school. As you know, he's from up in Maine.
Exactly.
I spent a lot of time, and what a player.
Yeah, he's really good. We'll see what Duke does. They got dumped the other night and kind of unceremoniously by Clemson, who played a great game. But we'll see how they do. They're still one of the best teams in the country. Charlie, we look forward to talking to you again next time. Thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Gary.
Charlie Gerow, President and CEO of Quantum Communications, with his analysis so far on what Trump has done. We'll get another analysis from Eugene DePasquale a little bit later on the show at 8:35 this morning. It is 7:48. When we come back, more news under the radar. Mark's got a lot of stuff for you, and we'll check it all out here on the Gary Sutton Show on WOYK.